Howdy, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems, the podcast where we tackle the leadership challenges that no one wants to talk about, but every business faces. I'm your host, Mel Ortiz with Activate Human Capital Group. Today's conversation is with Gary Schulz. You'll hear more about his background as we get into the episode, but what stands out most is the conversation we have around a question we don't talk about enough. Who challenges the CEO? In this conversation, we cover why CEOs don't have enough people in their world who will challenge their thinking, the difference between surrounding yourself with support versus surrounding yourself with the right kind of challenge, and how peer groups like Vistage can create space for honest feedback and accountability. Let's get to it. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to You've Got People Problems. I'm really interested in this conversation today. The topic is who challenges the CEO, and I'm joined by Gary Schulz, who's a friend of mine over the last, Gary, 4 or 5 years. You brought me in to speak to a couple of your Vistage groups. They had really fantastic members. You were a lovely, sage presence in the room, and I was just absolutely drawn to the way that you facilitate and share. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. We've had one of these, You've Got People Problems was focused on the EO peer group, and I thought it would be really fun to balance that against Vistage because it's a very different model. But let's start down this path by having you introduce yourself, your background, and how long you've been on the Vistage path.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you for this opportunity. Yeah, you've spoken on 2 different occasions to my groups here in the Central Valley. You're a Central Valley farm kid, just like I'm a 5th generation farm kid from the Pacific Northwest. So we have a lot in common working with our farming family business. So I've been a Vistage Chair now 6 years. I have 2 groups. I have a group of chief executive officers, and I also have a group of key executives, those that report to CEOs. So today, 26 total clients. The region that I cover is pretty expansive, everywhere from Merced County to Kern County. So I'm up and down Highway 99 regularly, and Zoom has been a good technology for staying in touch with members, and I do that. So Vistage, the Vistage model, Vistage has been around 65 years. There's about 800 other people like me that they've aligned with to chair these groups, and the role of the chair is to be on the lookout for really good members in our groups, keep the groups full. Our goal is 16 members per group, and so we meet monthly. The members move around. The member meetings move around. Each member gets a chance to host on their rotation. The chair's job, besides looking for members and that would be a good fit, would be to hire the speakers. So I stay in touch with members regularly about what topics would be good to bring in. And then the meetings are full day meetings. So the speaker has until noon. We have a quick lunch. And then in the afternoon, we go around the table. Everybody gets a chance confidentially to talk about what's really challenging them at that moment. And I select one of those members and we dive into the deep end of the pool with them and offer up some suggestions for them to take back and put to work. And they have to provide us with a deadline date that they will accomplish those things. So then from that moment to the next meeting, the next month, I get around and meet individually with every single one of those members. And if we've processed an issue for them, one of the first things I ask about accountability-wise is, how are you coming? I really challenge them. I'm the group's first line of accountability. How are you coming on those things you told the group you do? Because when we get back together, they will report on their progress of that, and we rarely fail. We've had some great successes. So that's in essence what we do with our Vistage group. And there's some other things I'm sure we're going to talk about this hour.
Sure. Well, thank you for being here. If you're here because you know Gary and not me, my name is Mel Ortiz, and my company is Activate Human Capital Group. My slice of the pie is making sure we've got the right people in the right seats, redeploying some people if they're not in the right seats, either whether internal or external to the organization, making sure people are engaged in work that they really enjoy doing and have clear expectations of how to win at work. So there's so much overlap between where Gary's groups go, where Vistage really goes, and then how do we deploy these ideas and goals within the organization. So I'm looking forward to this conversation because it's lonely at the top, right? Often we don't have good sounding boards and we don't have anyone who will challenge us. And sometimes, like we were talking about in the pre-show, you can't always trust the people who report into you because maybe they're angling for your job, especially if you're a hired gun and it's not like a family business where there's some pretty strong security that this is I'm an owner and a CEO. And so it's really helpful to have a set of outside eyes. And so that peer group brings together people who are not financially vested in your success, and they can really just have your back on these discussions. So I was hoping we could talk a little bit about the basic format of Vistage. You talked about the peer groups. You talked about the speakers. Can you speak to the confidentiality maybe and why that's such a critical underpinning of Vistage?
Sure. Vistage has 4 rules. One is confidentiality. We reinforce that every single time. We don't want something talked about in the group setting as far as issues or challenges that you're dealing with, and then see it on the front page of the business journal the next week. So my part of my job is creating a safe place for them to bring their A issues. What do they really need to work on meeting day? And after this global expert of a speaker talks to us in the morning, we get into business on what challenges are going on in the afternoon and allow plenty of time to work through those as a group. In the one-to-ones, then my private sessions with each of the members, why we get back into business on that. And if they're finding some struggles, I tend to ask more questions of them. Part of my job as the chair isn't to answer their questions, it's to question their answers and make sure that so just to be sure that their mindset is on problem solving, that they've got a growth mindset. They're growing themselves personally and professionally, and that they know that they're not the smartest person in the room. If they're the smartest person in the room, then we need to find them another room. And so, you and I are on a lot in the same business of finding the right people in the right seats. In fact, a chair that I just attended a workshop at Chair World with Brian Davis of Minneapolis and Nancy Giras in Colorado. And he reinforced to us there's 4 things that all CEOs must do. All CEOs must do. One of them is to develop and nurture and have the company's strategic plan. A second is making sure they've got the right seats, the right people in the right seats on the bus. A third is to develop and nurture and protect that company culture. And the fourth is to remove any obstacles that may be in the way of his or her leadership team doing their job. And I just thought that was just a great comment by him, and something that I've put up on the wall for our CEOs, that, hey, this is what you're in business to do. And so, we work really hard at improving the members of our groups, whether they're key executives working their way up or the owner, president, CEO of the company, and just clearing the deck of what's really keeping them awake at night so they can get on to item number 2, 3, 4, and 5 on their list.
So I'm going to pause you on the four things CEOs must do, because to me, it's very interesting that 3 of those 4 are people focused, right? People in the right seats, protect and nurture the company culture, and remove obstacles. Those are often people obstacles. There's resistance, there's saboteurs, I'm sure that probably crosses different obstacles, but three of those arguably are people related. And it isn't just the smartest person in the room that becomes a great CEO. It's really someone who can captain the team.
Yeah, there's coaching, mentoring, hiring, retaining, the the community relationships, the brand of the company, um, the succession planning of one generation to the next. It's oftentimes said by our speakers and the members around the table that this business of being a CEO is easy until you have to deal with all the people.
Yes.
And and so, getting the right people in the right seats on that bus is just very, very critical. And culture. I read this morning that your company culture is what you're known for, what you do, and how you treat people when nobody else is looking. And it's the true value of the company, but it's based on the core beliefs of the CEO. I've taken core values, and what EOS spends a lot of time with mission statements and core values, and I refer a lot of my members to EOS. But I'm a firm believer that a company's core values, if they're a reflection of the CEO, they really go internal to how well that CEO is grounded and centered and what their core beliefs are, what their belief system is, not just what they value, but what they believe in.
It's an interesting friction point if we bring in a new CEO who has a different set of core values than the organization, because there will become a rub that is sometimes insurmountable.
Yeah, there's some interesting stories out there about hiring that next CEO. There's some interesting stories out there that would be another podcast for another day. But whoever the whole succession to the next CEO, whether it's been a termination or a retirement, or the CEO's been stolen to go to another company, that's really, really serious business. What they say is that you hire slow and fire fast, but I don't know about the firing fast part, but the hiring slow is really, really important. And knowing what your company stands for, what the profile of the type of leader that you need in that seat. You can call them whatever you want to, but who's going to lead the company, and what kind of values do they have, and can you count on them in thick and thin, and when the going gets tough, kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, Gary, we've talked a fair amount about the structure of the Vistage groups. Let's dive into some of the common issues that you're seeing. Because if we're thinking about if our topic today is challenging the CEO, there's a couple of formats, from what I understand, about when that challenge happens. That might happen from a peer during our issue processing. That might happen during a one-on-one with you. What are some of the topics that get thrown on the table time and time again?
Melissa, what I find is that there's some if I'm a good active listener in the group settings, the monthly group meetings, and in our one-to-one meetings, our 1 to 2 hour sessions individually with the members, I can pick up on some common denominators. There for a while, we were having some issues with finance departments and reporting, especially during COVID. So much new types of financial reporting involved. And so we concentrated on that in a Vistage meeting and just went around the table and asked people, are you experiencing that, and how are you dealing with that? Also coming during COVID and coming out of COVID, there was a real employee retention issue. You know, people were having a hard time up and down 99 here from Tulare to Fresno. Is a real manufacturing stretch. 99. And it wasn't uncommon at all. You'd drive to Fresno during COVID, and here's the signs out on facing 99, welders, you know, or machinists, and people were jumping from one company to another for an extra $1 per hour. And so for these manufacturers, hanging on to their factory workers was a real challenge. And so we did some during COVID. One of the challenges that we addressed was an issue like that, and we set up a Friday, like 4:00 on Friday. We set up a optional Zoom get together, and just talk about what the challenges were this week from COVID, and how are you handling the office, you know, setting. What about this deal of masks and hiring and retention and the PPP stuff? And that was really important as peers to deal with that on a weekly basis. Some banks, the banks will remain nameless, but a bank in Fresno might be handling the PPP stuff entirely different than a bank in Bakersfield. Some very successful and very people-oriented, and some not so people-oriented. And so that was reassuring to the members. Probably the most common issue, the last 3 years that I've encountered with our members is the succession from the founder generation to Gen X or Gen Y or Gen Z even now. And you know, some of the founders of the company, people my age, you know, they grew up with some very male chauvinist, very, you know, black and white ways of running a company. I mean, I can recall on our family farm when I first got involved, why Grandpa owned the farm, Dad ran the farm, and us kids, no matter whether we were 20 on down to 10, we just got up in the morning, got dressed, had our pancakes, and went out and did what Dad said to do, no matter what. So it's different now, and it is different now, and we've identified by generation what our next set of leaders hope for and desire in their responsibilities, and what they're looking for if they're going to come work in a company and or take over the company. And so us founders, baby boomers and founders have to be willing to accept that it's just different now. And there's some great stories of the next generation coming back from college, coming back from working at another business, being invited to come into the business and run the company side by side with the founder, but still, Melissa, still having to get through that issue of we're going to handle employees differently. We're going to communicate internally differently. We're going to market differently because it's different now. There's social media. Back in the old days, we had no internet. You know, we listened to the Ronald Reagan Minute for our news and Paul Harvey for our news at noon. And it's just...
We're just bombarded with news.
It's different. You have the 24-hour news channel, and you've got, you know, liberal perspective over here and conservative perspective over here. And unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of in the middle. And so those of us that are getting our opinions from the news, we've got to be a lot more wiser and discerning on what we're listening to and what we're dealing with. And that's a big challenge of the founder generation succeeding to the Gen X and Gen Z generations to hand off the companies.
So I'm going to backtrack a little bit because one of the things that you mentioned around retention really caught my ear, not my eye, I guess, about I was thinking back to an engagement survey. We do a lot of employee engagement surveys to really work on measuring how well are we nurturing that culture and protecting it, like you mentioned earlier. And one of my clients in that corridor, I remember so vividly an open-ended comment from an employee, a manufacturing frontline employee. One of the questions we ask is, I'd recommend this organization as a great place to work on a 5-point scale. And a 5 is a hell yes. A 4 is more or less. A 3 is not really. A 2 is no. And a 1 is absolutely not. And I hate it here and I'm leaving tomorrow. Usually is the way those sentiment falls. And if you rate anything less than a 5, we often ask, what keeps you from recommending this as a great place to work? And if you answer a 5, we ask, tell me more. Why do you say that? And somebody gave an organization a 5 and said the reason was, I know I can walk across the street for another $1 an hour, but there's nothing that can match the family type relationships that we take care of each other, that I know people here have got my back, and I know people who work at that other place where they pay more, and you earn it. And it's not worth it to me to go home to my family with more stress and anxiety for that. And it was like, wow, this person really gets it. They get the holistic nature of work. And yes, we can chase the dollar, but how much that can affect our overall lives. It's such an interesting one. And certainly some of that pressure has died down as we've got more people seeking work in the marketplace. And the dynamics have shifted a little since what it was that, maybe 3 years ago when that was really hot and heavy topic. But I think a lot of the changes during COVID and people changing workplace, yeah, it was for $1 an hour, but often it was, I don't get paid enough to put up with X. That manager, that culture, quite frankly, to work in an unair conditioned environment, sometimes people just, that's not in their nature, and they went to a totally different type of job because it was like this life's too short mentality. And I thought that was a really interesting transition we made as a workforce, that often it wasn't for money, it was for lifestyle. So I don't know how much of that you saw.
Yeah, it tends to be all over the map with stuff like that, Melissa. We had a conversation with my key executive group. One of my CEOs asked me to take this topic into the key executive group and ask him the question, why is it that when I'm reviewing resumes to fill positions in my company, and this was a farm machinery manufacturer, why is it that I can't find enough resumes of people with 2 years or more experience? There's just a lot of job hopping going on. And so I asked, and that's pretty much all that I said, and threw it out on the table. And so these are in the group, all of them raised their hand when I asked, how many of you are responsible for hiring, or at least are doing something in the hiring process at your company? They all said yes. Then I asked them to go around the table and how long have you been at your company? I mean, I know, but remind all of us how long. And it went from 26 years, these are key executives, 26 years on down to 6 years. So they're not job hoppers, but they all recognize the challenge. And one of the big challenges is that there's a mentality out there that, in fact, I saw a post on LinkedIn the very next week about how there's a mentality that by changing jobs, you can increase your pay by 10%. As long as you're smart about how you're going about doing it. And so if you're wanting to increase your pay, just change your job. But I also know when I reported this to the CEO group, one of the members of the CEO group offered up. He says, "Yeah, I had the same thing happen. I had one of my guys that decided he wanted to take another job. It offered a little bit more money, and in 5 months he was back knocking at my door wanting his job back." And but there are more things than just the what the gross part of the paycheck. There's benefits, there's time off, vacations, company vehicles, flex time. Flex time sometimes isn't even talked about in the interview. But when you've got a challenge with a family member, I have a Vistage client that has three, and he has a relatively small staff, but he's got three people that he has taking time off right now because of a serious medical issue that a spouse is having, or an emotional issue that a child is having at school and needs mom or dad there at home with the youngster while they're recovering, and other things like this. Often, I had one client whose employee had very serious disease that took years to recover from, and had exhausted his paid sick leave months ago, and continued his pay because he'd been with the company a long time, and was praying and hoping that he could come back into the business, and he has. But those are commitments that CEOs are not bound by law. Oftentimes, they're not even bound by the employee handbook to do.
Just out of love and concern. And it's interesting you mentioned all the different elements. One of the things I've started doing with my clients is helping them develop a total compensation summary. I've got clients that have like a med spa, and they give free products and services. And we started quantifying what are the value of those. These are people who are often very interested in aesthetics that work in these organizations, and putting some dollars next to that, next to paid time off, even next to the payroll taxes and workers' comp that we contribute on their behalf. And when we do that once a year and show them, yes, this is what you make, but here's how much we're paying to have you here, it's amazing how sometimes we get a little more credit from employees, like, oh, I guess I didn't really realize how much you were committed to me and how much you were outlaying on my behalf. That helps employees sometimes see the position a little differently.
Right.
So, okay, so now I want to fast forward. We've talked about some of the retention issues. I want to go back to some of the succession issues because they're critical. And so many of the clients you work with and I work with are family businesses, which then changes the whole dynamic again, because we're not just talking about the business sector. We're talking about ownership. We're talking about family, and helping them see those as separate issues. I've got one client right now who we're going to have a conversation this afternoon about, I think your sons may need to be in the owner's box and may not be destined to be in the business box based on what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from the team. And so I kind of am curious, Gary, from your perspective, how much of the issues that end up on the Vistage table or in your one-on-ones are generational? How much are gender related? We talked about some of those transition, especially from the older generation patriarchs. And then sometimes it's just a confidence issue that maybe the kids came back too soon and they haven't gained the confidence and competence of someone who's ready to retire. Play out some of those scenarios and what you see and how you might challenge thinking of those CEOs.
Yeah, I think one of the wisest things that the founder generation, whether they created the company or they were the second or third generation along, but the guy or lady my age, one of the wisest things that they do is they explain to the member of the family that's going to come back, that has a desire to come back and be part of the business and perhaps run the company, is to admonish that you really need to go work for somebody else for a while.
Encourages that or discourages that?
Encourages it.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the healthiest things I've seen. Go do it somewhere else. See it somewhere else. Bring something of value back to this table and gain some confidence while you're outside of our family bubble.
Right. Yeah, my first experience of that was back in Reardon, Washington, when my dad and mom had six of us, and I was the oldest, and So when it came time to go work for one of the neighbor farmers during harvest season, why Dad was all for that for several weeks. Says that's going to be really important if you're going to ever want to come back and run your own business or come back and work beside me here. Is there's different ways to doing things. And the other thing from the other perspective, that the founder generation, the baby boomer generation has to deal with, especially with the generation X and Y, is this whole sense of entitlement. Oftentimes we've made, us helicopter parents, we've made it far too easy for our kids to succeed. For years it was, well, I want my kids, my children to have it better than I had it. And so we went the extra mile. I mean, participation trophies after, coming in last in soccer, and pizza, even when you get beat by 30 at basketball, and on and on and on. And so fast forward to today, you've got the younger generations coming into the companies feeling entitled, and the founder generation being resistant. And so the two are at loggerheads a lot, and there has to be a lot more alignment between the two. Neither one is right. There isn't any right, isn't any wrong, but there has to be a good trust relationship built. There has to be really good communication. There has to be a super willingness by the senior member of this organization to ask and want the younger member of the family or the next generation of leadership, requesting them and embracing them coming back into the company and making that happen. And if they want to fight that, it can be real trouble. So the more they can be together and aligned and regularly communicate and have a trust for each other, especially that founder with the younger generation of leadership, recognize the trust, and like you suggested, the confidence of the younger member. And that's where, programs like Vistage and programs like EOS are really, really important, because it takes that leadership, it takes developing those leadership skills and really takes it one day at a time and one issue at a time, with hundreds of years of experience around in Vistage, hundreds of years of experience around that table, and a trusting, confidential relationship to, let's talk about this, let's deal with this, let's eat the apple one bite at a time. What's the most important thing? And we get through. There was a study, Dun & Bradstreet did a study for Vistage in 2017, but it's still true today. And that is that Vistage members realize over twice the growth in revenue in their businesses than non-Vistage members in the same industry sector. And it's all about making the leader a better leader, a better person, a better member of the community, but tackling those biggest issues first. What are the biggest issues? And we've had issues of over $200 million to come to our chief executive group, solved them. They've gone back and gotten accomplished by the member numerous times that would likely not have happened if the person had not been in our Vistage group.
I think the reason I believe that so easily, Gary, is that Vistage forces you as an executive to carve out time to work on the business, when so often, in absence of that, we're just busy being busy. We're busy playing a game of whack-a-mole. There's plenty of work coming across our desks. And so unless we force ourselves to step away and do a program like Vistage, it can be hard to really look up and around and find those opportunities. So I do want to go backtrack for just a moment. I'll keep hopping back and forward with you. I apologize for that, but I don't want to interrupt you. So, one of the things that you were talking about as we think about this generational transfer that I've seen is there's a huge shift in terms of expectations. In addition to some entitlement concerns, one of the biggest things I see in the older generation to the younger, no matter what ages those people are, is it tends to be older generation was, you are an extension of my hands. I'm calling the shots, you're running point, and we're getting things done. It's a divide and conquer, or not a divide and conquer, but really there's a point person. And then the younger generation tends to want to divide and conquer, say, I want really smart people around me that I can depend on to have their portion. I'm going to have my portion, and together we can do more, because one person can really only control so much effectively. And that's been a huge rub in a lot of client organizations I've seen, where the older generation really struggles to get their head around that shift and that level of trust going to multiple people, rather than, my dad's mantra was, there can only be one person in charge, and that's me. It was very simple and clear. But our generation's like, well, you be in charge of that, and you be in charge of that, and we're going to go our different ways, come back together and solve the problems, and then keep pushing forward on all of our different fronts. And that's been a real struggle I've seen for the older generation to go, well, I don't really like it that way, but I can see the benefits. And when they start to come around, then they've got multiple people to mentor, and then they've found their spot in the next iteration of the business. And that can be a great asset for those up and coming leadership teams. But this desire for the next generation to just be a carbon copy of me puts so much pressure, especially on that next generation of offspring, to be dad. But when I was growing up, dad was already taken. And so I had to be someone else. And now I'm trying to overcome who I am to just be like them. And it causes shame and frustration and a lot of heartache, honestly. So I don't know how often that shows up on your table, but God, it's something I see that just runs rampant on my client interactions.
Well, so one of the things we've done is, in terms of challenging our CEOs, we created a book club for our CEOs and our key executives to participate in. And it's based on Patrick Metzger's post that he put on LinkedIn of the 30 must-read books for all business owners. And it reminds me of the book. We'll get to it eventually. We haven't read it yet, but we read a different one every single month. And it's The 6 Types of Working Genius by Lencioni. And the point he tries to make in that book is, you don't want to hire clones. If you're the CEO, you don't want to clone yourself in the business. You need, all the different types of key leaders with the personality traits, the input that they'll provide, the different types of energy and interest and passion that they bring to the company, so that there's a good balance and you're not missing out on anything and things aren't falling through the cracks. Really, a really good concept and a really good evaluation of your team. And it flies in the face of the founder generation that says, I'm the leader here, period. And that's just the way that it is. And there just needs to be, it's just different now, and there needs to be far more delegation, the elevate and delegate perspective, that have people in the right seats on that bus doing what they're really passionate about and skilled in doing, and finding people that can fill those gaps when those gaps occur.
I love this concept that stars have sharp points, and they should, and that we can find other people to overlap our stars, but they can fill in our gaps with totally different sets of talents, so that teams can be well-rounded while we maintain these sharp points on our stars. Because too often people are told to be more well-rounded, which means dulling the points on their stars rather than sharpening those points. And so that's one that tends to really resonate with teams of all different sizes and shapes, to be like, oh yeah, I don't need to be all the things. If this guy can cover my left flank and she can cover my right, and together we can just keep pushing forward, it's a really good one. And I know we're running out of time, but the one we didn't really cover was issues around right people in the right seats, and how often, at least on my plate, and I don't know if it comes to yours, is we'll keep having these recurring issues with a single player on the team. And sometimes that challenge of they may be in the wrong seat, they may be in the wrong organization, and is that the issue we really need to address? When someone's been with us a long time, I have a client who had an employee who'd been there for 28 years. And from the outside looking in, it's like, I think this person isn't meant to be in your organization anymore. You've kind of outgrown them. They don't fit the culture anymore. And that's a really hard one to deal with as we think about loyalty and connection. But if we can help them move to a place they're better suited, it's better for their health and well-being. It's better for our productivity and profits. And that's a very delicate one that often comes up in my conversations.
Yeah, it's a sensitive one to the other staff members, the other members of the team, and but what it's doing to the culture, the whole concept of that traction and EOS deals with about the get it, want it, and capacity to expand, learn, and capacity to take on more is just one that when I see my Vistage members that get into EOS either on their own or with an implementer, and they really embrace the employee evaluation part of that. Does that employee get it? Do they want it? And what about the capacity issue? If they take that seriously, that's really an important part of the whole thing, and it takes it away from much of the personality part of things, and really much more of an objective look at that person. What do they bring to the table? Do we have a seat in the bus where they can be reassigned to, or do we just need to help them find another company? I mean, Alan Mulally did a 1-hour webinar with us. He was the former CEO at Boeing and at Ford Motor Company, I think, and he did a 1-hour webinar for Vistage. And he told a great story that he was very much inclusive, that this was an inclusive decision-making operation. And he had a member of his team come to him after the first required attendance meeting, and he said, this just isn't for me. I wasn't hired up to do it this way, and you just need to know. And he says, well, I'm gonna give you the weekend to think about that, and we'll talk again on Monday. And he comes back in on Monday, and he says, I've thought about that, and I still believe I was hired to do things this way, and that's the way that I need to do it. And he said, fine, you'll have X number of weeks here, and I will write you a good letter of recommendation. You just need to find another place because this is the way it's going to be. And oftentimes, Melissa, I will say to my members of my Vistage groups, one of the important things in being a CEO or being a leader in a company is there's sometimes the leaders have to lead. And when it comes to the right people in the right seats and the culture of the organization, that's where CEOs have to be challenged to lead. There are certain non-negotiables. And when it comes to your core beliefs and core values and the culture, what are lines that you can't see people stepping over? That's when the CEO, the president, needs to step in and lead.
Well, I can't think of better words of wisdom to close our discussion on, Gary. This has been a really great conversation. The Vistage model is wonderful. You are a tremendous facilitator for these groups. I've watched you in action, and it's been a real pleasure. So if people would like to reach out to you to learn more about Vistage, well, how would you like them to reach out?
Well, I've got 8,000 connections on LinkedIn, so somebody's found out how to find me that way. That's a great way. Or the Gary.Schulz at vistagechair.com. I still have a phone number that people can call. I look forward to that, or reach out to Melissa. She's got my number on speed dial.
Anytime. Well, thank you so much. For those of you listening, I hope that you'll join us for another episode of You Got People Problems in the future. And thank you again, Gary. See you soon.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of You've Got People Problems. If you got something out of the conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with the other leaders in your network, because let's face it, we all have people problems. You can watch full episodes on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcast app. But either way, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.